Oh, hi.
Hi,
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm awesome. My fantasy teams are doing well, so it was a good Sunday.
Ooh, great. I just got back from work, so excited to debate this. And so this topic is something I've heard maybe like since more than a year, but I've never watched a debate on it. And it's a very interesting concept. And so, if in case I think of it personally, I don't really know, I don't really have an opinion on which side I would strongly get into. But in terms of like debate, I definitely know that I have a slight inclination in terms of, the right to be forgotten. And then that's where I chose this topic. And then I'm so excited because as I said, like I've been hearing this topic since a year and then no one has ever talked on it. So, like I would love to have a good discussion on it. So I'm excited.
Yeah, same here. Actually, I work as a researcher. So in research, we come up against this whole idea of privacy and what constitutes legitimation all the time. So
Mhm.
I too have heard a lot of talk about this, but never actually seen a debate on it. So I think it's important to have that discussion.
Okay, great. So, but okay, I'll just like clarify a few things before starting the debate. So I know that the right to be forgotten concept is more of the idea that the European Commission actually brought up, and then they had this idea that any links from the search engine Google, and like it cannot be. So though if in case let's imagine that the New York Times actually posted an article about me, so it would not appear when I search Jamuna Gautam on Google, but then it would actually exist in the website. So that's what they propose, which I would maybe take a step further than that. So I would actually argue that the article itself should be removed from the New York Times, instead of just saying that the search engines should be um, not having that link. So I think because that's kind of like very superficial, maybe superficial to me, because I think it's more like if in case you tell us that maybe the article would still remain on New York Times but not in Google Engine, it's more like the idea that the book can stay in the library but cannot be included in the library like card catalog. It's just the same thing. So that does not necessarily fascinate me a lot. So I'm just moving a step ahead and then arguing that it should be removed from New York Times itself. So talking about the right to be forgotten, what exactly it would mean is that it requires the website or search engine or any kind of links to me, any kind of sites to remove the links that appear to be inadequate or irrelevant or no longer relevant or excessive in the light of time that has elapsed. So if in case some maybe if in case a person is an abuser and then like he comes in to the media, it's totally fine because he has done a crime. And if he is subjected to the media, that's completely fine because the public actually has to get the information. But maybe after a certain elapsed time, maybe like some years down the lane, I think it totally deserves the right to be removed. So that's kind of like the area I want this debate to go on, and not necessarily just crimes. Like it could just be as minor a thing, like maybe you were drunk in a party and then because like today it's, I mean, everything is so accessible, and then like there's no control on your personal life because there's always a third party involved, maybe in terms of like pictures or anything. I think there's a lot of involvement of a third party in your lives today. So I think it's very important that an individual is given a right to have a control on themselves, a good control of their lives and all. So I think that's the kind of area I'll be debating on. But I just want you to know that it will not just be focused on crimes. Like it is also so much more than that. It is also maybe the simple idea that maybe my picture of my drunk like a party, like where my call is or anything, that comes as an official information or anything like that. So yep. So I think I'll just pass on the mic to you to know what grounds you are on this debate.
Yeah. So the grounds that I would stand on is while you would stand on the grounds that this House believes in the right to be forgotten, my stance is this House believes in the right to free speech. I think that there is an inherent point in which you can only have one or the other. You cannot have both. Because the right to be forgotten necessarily needs a little bit here. here, but I actually have 4 arguments that I want to go into. The first argument here would be the question of rights versus privileges. So you're arguing for this right to be forgotten, but there is a significant difference between the idea of right and the idea of privilege. So be alive. That's the common idea of what a right would be, as opposed to a privilege, which is something that's choose to give to me. There's person A and person B. Person A is me. Anything that I deserve simply by being me is a right. Person B is you. Anything you might choose to give to me would be something that would be a privilege. So there's person A and person B here. And I think this is an important distinction, because this idea that we have a right to be forgotten for the things that we did wrong is not actually something that is just deserved by us. This is something that others could choose to give to us. But if I committed some sort of horrible crime, or even just a minor crime, I don't have a right to have that forgotten by everybody else. If I hurt someone close to me, or if I hurt anyone, if I hurt somebody, they are not obligated to forget about this. In the same way that the internet is not obligated to forget about this. Nobody is obligated to forget, because it might be, if they choose, they could choose out of the goodness of their heart to forgive me for the things that I have done. They could choose out of the goodness of their heart to remove any articles they had written about the horrible things that I had done. But that would not be my right. That would be a privilege that they choose to offer to me. Very different concept. And it especially causes problems when we get into the idea of legality. So I'm going to talk about that now. The second argument that I have is that of free speech versus right to be forgotten. Now, you had talked about this a little when you talked about how the European Commission's ruling had said that they would remove links from Google, but they weren't removing the actual articles themselves. And you were saying that it needs to take a step further, which actually is even more of an issue to me, because the New York Times has a right to say what they wish, as long as it is not slanderous or libelous in some sort of way. They can say things that are negative about others. They can publish opinion pieces that are critical of Donald Trump. One of the places where we see this with the right to be forgotten is that movie reviews are often critical. And so those reviews have a right to their opinion that the movie itself was bad. And those reviews will stand for the next 10, 15 years. Actually, they'll stand forever. There is no inherent right for someone who had made that movie to say, oh, this is irrelevant now. You shouldn't have this piece up on me. So the reason why that would be is because the reviewer has a right to say what they think. They have that authority. That is actually protected both in the United States, the First Amendment, and the European Union has also protected the right of people to speak, which is why the idea of the right to be forgotten has caused a conflict, even in Europe, over this, because you have two inherently contradictory rights. One in which people have a right to criticize, and the other in which people supposedly have a right to not be criticized or to be forgotten for the things that they have done. Those two things cannot be together. You have to have either one or the other. And the second problem with this is the idea of property. The New York Times writes an article, and that is their property. They could choose out of the goodness of their hearts to let go of it if they wanted, but it's still theirs. There's no right of someone who has done something or someone who has disagreed to say, oh, you can't have that anymore. So the idea of the right to be forgotten necessarily impedes on the ideas of freedom of speech, freedom of property, and freedom of association. And I think that pretty much covers what I was going to go there. But let me just talk about the things you said, and then I'll give it back to you. So you talk about how links from Google should be removed, and that's the European Union's thing. And the problem with this, with the European Union's stance, was that if you're removing the links from Google, and I think you talked about this as well, but if you remove links from Google or you remove the links from the search engine, you aren't actually removing the links themselves. So you aren't actually giving the people the right to be forgotten.
Yeah.
But if you do give the people the right to be forgotten, that the court case in Europe ruled or no longer relevant if someone can show that an article was inadequate, irrelevant, or no longer relevant. Those are the ones that get removed. The problem with that standard is that it is inherently subjective. Who's to say what is irrelevant or no longer relevant? This is why movie reviews have started becoming criticized in Europe, because after years, people can say, oh, this is no longer relevant. But who's to say? You can't say that. It's entirely subjective. So it doesn't actually work as a standard. And the last thing that you talked about, how it shouldn't just be crimes, it should be anything. Like if you had gotten drunk and there's a picture of you drunk. But that's a problem in and of itself too. Because once again, we're just talking about regular people who could have property. Maybe you took a picture of something and somebody else says, oh, you can't have that. Or you had the movie reviews, or if someone did something criminal. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how big. In fact, if you're going to go into small things, that might even be bigger of a problem. So overall, I don't think this makes any sense that there is any right, because it's simply a privilege that people could choose to give, and you get into a ton of problems if you do try and give it as a right.
Okay. A lot of issues with what your case presents, but firstly, I think okay, I just had too many things on my mind that I'm just not getting proper thing up. Okay, so in terms of to forget, I think a better ground to consider it would be as I said, a clearly identifiable reference to whether the information is harmful or I just don't get this word. Okay, or exclusively personal. So I think this is the ground that we have to consider when we are actually disseminating information to the public. And then what constitutes a public record or what constitutes a public interest is something that's in itself an unfolding issue. Like it's something that's very I don't know, very controversial, like what should be given to the public or what should not be given to the public it's already something very controversial. But as I said, if in case the information is harmful, or if in case the information is exclusively personal, which is very much happening in terms of the yellow journalism that is very prevalent today, because yeah, there's the sensational journalism of the yellow press that has actually been doing a lot of things, that has actually not been considering a lot of grounds. And I think this is something what it applies to when I talk about to forget. But I'll just give you a few examples. I think the thing about movie review, I don't really. I mean, I think movie review, like in case of that one, I think it would just be valid like for always. I mean, I don't see how a movie review would not be valid maybe after 10 or 11 years, because it's just how I think when I'm arguing about this, I'm not necessarily focusing on those kind of things, because I think those are opinions, like those are not the factual things, or those are not exclusively personal, or those are not necessarily harmful to people. So I think that does not necessarily apply to what I'm arguing on. So let's just see. I'll just give you an example. So there is actually a porn star in India, which I'll not. I don't know if in case it's fine to mention or not. I think yeah. So she's a porn star in India. So she was a porn star. Sorry, she was a porn star, but it was maybe a decade ago, or maybe like 6 to 7 years ago. Now she is into Indian industry, and she's actually trying to establish a good life for herself. She's actually trying to establish a good actress's life for herself, as she has left porn maybe like 6 to 7 years ago. But now what happens is that now when in the current scenario season, she's getting movies, like she's getting roles. But the problem is that whenever she faces an interview, there's a kind of different behavior that is expected from an interviewer towards her. And that is because she has this image of a porn star. And okay, so this does not necessarily mean that if in case, like, you know, she's not on the internet, maybe like one would not know it. But, you know, it's just the fact that that thing actually changes so much about it, even though she has started a new life right now, because the video she had actually played for is not going to be removed. So I'm actually not talking about legality here. I mean, because maybe she had been paid for the video. So, like, you know, it's not, I know that it's not something that she can actually go on into legality and then like ask, hey, like, you know, don't delete these videos and everything. But it's just about I think this debate is more about the value-based thing. So I don't necessarily want to go on legality on, like, you know, it is actually illegal to actually do it, but more about the idea, in terms of like a value-based concept. I would like to make this debate, or, you know, turn to us. So, like, you know, the fact that she's being laid back, or because of that videos or because of that image, because if in case her name is typed in Google, like, or maybe her name is typed anywhere, that's the first thing that comes about her, like, her porn videos or anything like that. So I think it just creates a big impact on our lives and on her life, and then even those who has decided on to move forwards, it's not giving that right to her. And then I think that applies to this case and not just this one. So what happened in Nepal was that so there was a time when what happened was people were very scared to go to, like, maybe hotels or maybe anywhere for accommodation, because if in case they were traveling from one place to the other. So what happened was that those people from the restaurants or like the lodges, they had this CC camera on the shower, like, top of it. So every time like one had a shower, they were like capturing a video of it, a naked video of it, and then they were selling these videos maybe on internet or anywhere. So now that's the problem here, like, so what a person like would, I mean, who's not even doing an act of a stupidity because the person is just taking a bath, but that news or that thing is actually featured on a global level. Now what is the impact of that thing on the person itself? So this is something that I actually want to argue and when I talk about the right to be forgotten. Maybe if in case some people are making love in a bedroom, and then if in case that is going to be featured because of the stupidity um of the hotel managers or anyone else. So like, so it's actually disrupting their entire lives, and then so that's something that's not acceptable, and those are the cases that actually deserve the right to be forgotten. So when I talk about it, that's something I believe in. And the next thing is about in terms of crimes, like as I said, there should be a light of the time that had actually elapsed before we give this right to anyone. And in fact, there is already an expungement or sealing of certain criminal records, especially addressing juvenile offenders. Um, Maybe like yeah, so yeah, it's something that the state has regulated itself. And then there's this another thing that happens. And okay, where was it? So it was that, a person could actually the pre-employment background checks are actually typically subjected to the Fair Credit Reporting Act 1970. And in an overview, it limits utilizing info concerning civil suits or judgments and arrest records to events occurring within the previous 7 years. So when I mean about the time, the elapsed time, there definitely is a certain limitation on when or how this information is going to be outthrown from the internet or from the global dissemination. So yeah, I think I'll just pass on the mic to you. I know that I didn't much address your side, but I'll definitely do it the next time.
Okay. So you talked about how you want this to be a value-based debate. I would agree with that. And I think that the concept of a right to be forgotten is a good idea if it is a privilege. But it is inherently different than an actual right. When we talk about the values, that was one of the things that I think we really have to get down to here. You're acting like there is a right for people to not have these things, but there's not. This would be like I talked about. There's person A and person B. Person A is the person if they commit a crime or if something happens, person A will not have a
That's fine.
The difference between a right and a privilege is person A versus person B. Person A has a right to something. Person B can choose to give something to person A. So that's the difference here. I haven't seen any reason why this would be a right, especially when this right steps on the toes of so many other actual, like legally accepted rights. For instance, free speech, private property, freedom of association. Okay, so hopefully that was clear, because I started out phrasing that poorly. But so you talking about you responding to my statement that the standard of inadequate, irrelevant, or no longer relevant. I said that was inherently subjective, and you followed up on that by saying that the standard should be if it is harmful or to the person or harmful or personal information. That's the type of information that should be removed from the internet. Now, I have two responses to this. My first response is that public records are subjective. The whole idea of what goes into the public record is already something that is a very controversial topic. And it's hard to say what is a harmful or personal thing. For instance, as a researcher, I can already tell you that everybody's addresses are already in the public record. Most people's phone numbers are already in the public record. These things could be called harmful or personal and according to your right to be forgotten, would be removed from the public record. But now you're getting into way more of an issue because you're now changing everything about the public record. So it's impossible in the first place. I don't think you realize how much information actually is out there in the public record. I think that what you're focusing on more is difficult things that people have done, things that might make them look bad. But things that make them look bad would again come back to the concept of rights versus privileges. We don't have a right to have everything we've done poorly in the past removed. Nobody has that as an inherent right of themselves. That privilege could be granted to us by someone else, but that isn't something that we just deserve. So another point I want to bring up here is that of personal responsibility. Your argument here completely removes the concept of personal responsibility from the people. If people do something bad, they do not have a right to just have that removed. It's their personal responsibility not to do something bad in the first place. So there's a lot of things here that I don't see what you're saying as a right. Now you talked about how your response to movie reviews was that movie reviews are valid for always. And this differentiates them from the idea of someone having done something bad. And so I agree with this. 180,000 requests for right to be forgotten removals in the European Union since this thing was passed. And most of them were not actually crimes or anything. They were just points of opinion. Is that what the European Union has recognized is that this is an inherently subjective thing, which is, and that's to be expected, honestly, when you try and value a privilege as a right. It doesn't work. That's why we have to talk about the legality of this. It doesn't make sense, especially when it gets in the way of people's property rights and people's speech rights. Which would be right to know. I think this is important to talk about because if someone has a kid, people have a right to know that. It doesn't matter if that person might have done that 70 years ago. Maybe they're 90 now. That's still something that should be out there. There should be understanding of these things that people have a right to know. And it wouldn't be right to have someone who had raped and murdered a kid 70 years ago be able to have a place near a school. That's dangerous. And I'll bring up one more argument here. I'm kind of making things up as I'm going here, but I'm following up on this because just the concept of it just keeps getting worse when I think about it, which is that a lot of the time, while people could change, a lot of people don't change. If someone raped and murdered a kid, even if it was 70 years ago, they don't have a right to be forgotten because there's something wrong with that mindset that they could go that far. To say that they have a right to be forgotten is dangerous because this is something they should know about because they have gone past a certain line that people draw. And you get two examples here. The first part in India, and I'm just going to cross a lot of the same analysis I had here. I think that it's understandable that we would want to be able to help such a porn star and actually be trying to make things better for herself through regular acting and everything. But that would still be a right versus privilege distinction. That would be us choosing to give her more of the benefit of the doubt rather than her actually having a right to expunge her previous record. And then the naked videos in Nepal that you had talked about, my response to this one is this is right. There's a difference between the right to be forgotten, which is just I get to remove consider harmful or personal, versus right to privacy. Right to privacy is the concept that if someone is doing something that violates your rights, or that would be necessarily harmful to you in general, which would be taking naked videos of you in the first place. That's what right to privacy addresses. Right to be forgotten is about the idea of getting rid of the material later on. Period of time we're going to get rid of it. They're different things. He would have covered that issue. And I think that should be it for me for now.
Okay. For the first thing, I think right to privacy is something that's very very depend. I mean, there's two things: right to be forgotten and right to privacy. I think go kind of like along together. That's what I believe, because I think it's a digital age, and then um it's just the information is just so upright, like it's everywhere, I think. And then people love to perpetuate things and then publish so that they are remembered, or as I said, the concept of sensational journalism or maybe anything like this. So you know there's very less which actually we can maybe consider to be true, or which we can actually trust upon. And I think that in today's world, a lot of people have maybe lost their respect or lost their maybe credibility to certain kind of newspapers or institutions, because there's, as I said, there's a lot of perpetuations that goes from people in this digital age, because there's always this right to be, or maybe interest or inclination towards um, right to be remembered. Like people love to do it. So I think right to privacy and right to be forgotten comes along together, because if in case someone violates the right to privacy, and then that's when the right to be forgotten is coming into play. So I think this, for me, this to go along together. And okay, let me just talk about just the thing about, okay, the okay, what was that? It was the movie review thing. Okay, so in terms of a movie review, I know it's debatable. I know that people have different opinions, but it's something of an argument. Like, one can argue from one side, the other can argue from the other side. But when I'm arguing for the right to be forgotten, there's no two sides. Like, there's no two sides on it. It's a decision. So I know I'm not so much clear on this, but it's just that there's no two sides to it. Uh-huh.
Can I just follow up on this one just briefly here? I think the difference here is that there's a subjective idea of what is harmful or personal. And so people are saying, oh, this movie review was critical of me, and today we can see my movie was actually great, so that movie review from 10 years ago is irrelevant. Please remove it. That's the difference. It's specifically in relation to right to be forgotten laws that they're trying to get rid of critical movie reviews.
Okay. So, but in terms of this, like in terms of this is the person speaking. This is not the producer speaking, or this is not, this is not someone who is exclusively personal to what's for the movie speaking here. Like, I
Oh
think,
yeah,
yeah, but it's
that's who they are. It's the producers and directors and writers of the movies who are
mhm,
saying
after
must
10
remove
years.
that right to be forgotten.
So after 10 years, like they're coming ahead and then saying that we should the review that was 10 years before should be removed. That's weird.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
no, like Rotten Tomatoes is a movie aggregate website, and so many people will watch movies based on what their aggregate score is. So if someone has a high score, it seems to be
Mhm.
a good movie, and people will buy that movie. So the producers have a financial interest in getting rid of bad reviews to make their Rotten Tomatoes score look better. So even if so they're using right to be forgotten laws to say, oh, you must remove this. I have a right. It's irrelevant now. And it's inherently subjective to them.
Oh,
So that's fine.
okay. But I'm really sorry, but I don't really get still, like, get much of this idea that why it could be. I mean, it could be like irrelevant in terms of like harming public in some way, or if in case, like, it's just so overwhelming or something that it should be removed. I don't see much of an urgency in that case here, but I'll just go I'll be explaining the further case. So yeah, I think in this case it's more opinionated. Like maybe the producers are having one opinion about this, and then the other people have other opinions about the movie. But in terms of the ideas I'm talking about, in terms of the right to be forgotten, I think there's um, more than an argument. I think it is a self decision that comes ahead in the play. So if in case, as I said, um, the women, like, who was a porn star before, now she's getting into a new life, and then she wants those videos. Maybe she wants she deserves those videos to be removed. And I think, like, in this case, I think it's more of a decision. It's, oh, I'm not I'm not explaining it properly. I get it, but it's, yeah. I mean, it's not controversial. Like, it does not have a two side. That's what I mean. It's a decision to be made. So I think that's why it's a bit different from the cases we are presenting. And also in terms of the public record, like, um in terms of public record, I don't think necessarily you can I know that some, maybe the United States, like, Homeland Security and everything, has my personal information, my, like, date of birth and everything, like my country of nationality and everything, but it is not actually disseminated in the public. The public cannot actually get into it and then see what my nationality is or when I was born. So I think this kind of records is something that's not problematic to me, because my phone number or anything, that if in case the department has it, it's not a problem. But the problem is with the public getting access to it. So because the department is the, I mean, it's the government, right? So, and I think, yeah, the thing about public record, I didn't, yeah, so much get it, but, and I think the thing about the personal responsibility, that not to do something bad is one's personal responsibility. But now even this is kind of like a contradiction when you see not to do something bad. So let's just imagine the porn star playing porn videos before. So is it necessarily bad? Or that was her freedom of expression, that was her, like, freedom of speech, if in case you see, so that also applies here. If in case you, I mean, we don't have a clear distinction if you're actually arguing that right to free speech is being violated with the right to be forgotten. So the thing women did before is also not something bad. They did it because of maybe her situations or anything, and that was her right to freedom of expression or right to freedom of speech. So yeah, so I think it's something that it's kind of like interdependent. So if in case we are touching something, we're definitely touching something else as well. And so okay, so alrighty, what was I going to talk about? So I think the digital media is so much like economically driven sometimes, and so I think um it's very necessary that we address a common ground or better ground to actually consider this kind of rights, because these are very sensitive. And then it's definitely, so when we're talking about this right, it's also definitely talking about individual privacy rights as well. So let's just take an example of, like, why should a few drunkards, like, drunken student photographs preclude people's stolen applications to maybe become accountants or anything, like, because this is something that's definitely going to pop up whenever they are maybe researching about this, about their employee or anyone. So these are the minor things that actually plays a great role in terms of a person's future as well. So let's just see, maybe a person was a drug addict before. He was drug addict. He was actually kept in a rehabilitation center, and then, like, he got out, and then now he's like, he has got out of it now. Let's see, like 10 years down the lane, he wants to be a counselor now for drug addicts, like, so there will definitely be a lot of thinking around it. There would definitely be limitations. Maybe he'll not even be allowed to do that because he was once a drug addict. So I think this is actually not letting a person have a self growth in terms of their life, because not necessarily because it's very difficult to identify what they did in the first place, like why they did the things they did in the first place. So why the person became a drug addict is itself something that's not very clear, like. And then I think to decide his future based on that decision of him, while he's already, like, out of it, while he actually wants to maybe be a counselor, and now we are stopping that because of a record he has on the internet. And I think that's something that's again putting away the rights of freedom, or maybe putting away the rights to maybe exercising his speech or anything, like, for a person. So I think it's all of this rights, freedom, free speech, forgotten, privacy. I think these are, like, very interrelated, and I think nothing is independent of each other. And then when we are considering one thing, I think we should definitely consider the other as well. So yeah, privacy rights, and even in terms of what information goes into the public is also my concern here. But yeah, I think I'll just pass the mic to you to see what you have to say on this.
Oftentimes they do go together, but they're not the same thing. Privacy rights is the idea that someone might not have the rights to take certain photographs or something of you. For instance, I can't go into your house, take photos of what's there, and then bring that out, because that would not be my property. I would not have a right to that. You have a right to privacy, where legally recognized right to privacy, I can't see doing that. That's the difference. The next right to be forgotten is that I have a legally legally recognized, my actual property that I took a photo of. Like if I take a screenshot of this debate right now, that would be legal property of mine. The right to be forgotten would be the idea that after 20 years or whatever, you could say, oh, you must remove that. That's a different idea, because one of them is, they're different ideas. They're similar. They could go together, but they're not the same thing inherently. Now, my overall thing here is that I think we have multiple different rights versus one privilege. We have the right to know of the people. The people have a right to know if something is going on. An employer should know if someone has offended someone's committed crimes. Speech and to criticize. These are legally recognized rights. People have a right to say, this is what happened. This person did this piece of arson. This person was a drug addict. This person did lewd acts with a child. These are the things that people have the ability to write and talk about. They're legally recognized. We also have the right to property, at least legally. There's the right to private property. These are things that all would have to be sacrificed for the privilege to be forgotten. It's not a right. There's nothing about it that says, I have a right to get rid of anything that we have done in this conversation. 20 years from now, I do not have an inherent right. There's nothing about this discussion, even if I get destroyed, I don't have a right to say to you, you must remove this debate from the internet. I could ask you, I could say, you know what, Jimmy, I think that I got destroyed. I think this is bad for my image. Would you please take that debate down? And I would be able to do that. You must remove it. And that's where we get into the problem here. Because they're legally recognized rights. And once they use the subject that they're going to say, all of this differently with subjective decision making, which is why I talked about movies. Movie reviews are being taken down. It's a subjective thing, and yet they're getting taken down. That is, the movie reviewer themselves had the right to freedom of speech to criticize the movie. They had the right to property to write that review and own that review on their site. But because of the court case, they're trying to take those down. And in many cases, they are taking them down. That's the problem here. Now, if a movie reviewer had written a critical review and the director of the movie said, you know what, man, it's been 15 years, and I don't think we need this review anymore, could you please take it down? The reviewer would have the option of giving the producer that privilege. I think that's the same thing that we see with all of your examples here, like the porn star. The porn star is not controversial, you said, because people should want her to make a better life for himself. That's not controversial. I agree. I think most people would agree that they would be willing to grant her the privilege of taking down such information. But it's not her right, because that would be getting her out of her own personal responsibility for the things she had done in her past. She does not have a right to have that information simply removed. You also talked about, the same thing would be the case with the drunken photograph example that you said. We could have the ability to ask the person, could you please get rid of that photograph? It isn't good. But it wouldn't be our right to say, you may not have that photograph, unless we were talking about privacy rights. If someone took a photograph of you in your house while you were drunk, that would be a privacy violation, which would be able to be from those residents. The same thing would be the case with fact that he had committed an offense, which was in the public record, it's not about the public record, and it was removed from the public record. Again, it's right to property, right to speech, all of those are protected legally, as opposed to his right to privilege. If people wanted to place him, they could offer him the proof of that material. But that's not his right in any way, shape, or form. And you also talked about the public record is not that big, but that's incorrect. But I don't think we really need to worry about that. Let's focus mainly on the idea of the value discussion here, the rights versus the privilege. Go ahead, because we only have 5 minutes left.
Okay. Alrighty. So I'll just give you an example on the right to be forgotten and the right to privacy. So the thing about a person taking a picture of me when I was drunk at home, it's definitely the idea of right to privacy. But now the problem comes here when the person actually uploads this picture on the internet, maybe on a website or somewhere. Now, like, and then I become a sensational like star the next very day. Now the problem is with this me like with this very idea that when my information or when my public like when my picture is actually put into a public dissemination, and that's when I have problem with, because I become a sensational star. Maybe people, like now it's a big problem, and then now I can actually request maybe the website, or so maybe the person who's actually handling the information, that those information should be taken down because it's my right to be forgotten. And as you said, like it's not like, definitely whenever this actually comes into practicality, it's not that you can just go ahead and then tell that, hey, like get this down. It's no more relevant. I think there's a lot of procedures that actually goes along with this. And then even in terms of Google, which is actually looking after more than 70,000 cases, I think they just grant this access or this right to just maybe 53% of the records that come into it. So that means that there's a lot of case to case investigation on this, and then it's not something that just happens quickly. And then if in case you tell that, hey, just take this down, it's not something that happens so quickly. It's something that goes with a very calculated process. And then, as you said, when you are asking for this, you're not telling that, give me the right, like just take it down. So it's more of like calculated approach, and then you're requesting someone, and then that's how it goes along. So just
Wait, so you're saying that's a good thing? Are you saying that's a good thing? That it should be that way? That we should ask people to take it down rather than making them take it down?
no, I mean, I'm just saying that's how it goes in practicality. Like you cannot suddenly like go to, I mean, you cannot suddenly like go ahead and then like take this down, but you are requesting it, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
but that's the
requesting
difference.
is in
That's the
I
difference.
mean, it's just that it does not necessarily have to be aggressive. That's what I mean.
Well,
It does not have.
if there
Uh-huh.
is a right to it, if there's a right to it, which is legally protected, then
Mhm.
yes, it would be aggressive. It would be, you must take this down. Are you saying you want that? Because
I mean,
that's what your resolution says.
okay. So, as I said, like it does not. From in my case, I would argue that it does not necessarily have to be aggressive, depending on the severity of the matter. So, if in case, let's see, a boy is not has not been convicted of a sexual assault any time in his like entirety of life, but as I said, there's a lot of perpetuation of information to it, and then a lot of sensational journalism. So, if in case someone posts about an information that he was maybe convicted of a sexual assault or something, like in that case the person can definitely go ahead and then like be like, hey, take that down, that's not me, like cal- get the right information, get the right fact, like
That would be slander. See, that this is the thing. This is the difference here. Slander and libel and privacy laws are already on the books. They already exist to protect against inaccurate information that's out there. We're talking about accurate information. If accurate information that is owned by the people through their right to property is there, that's what the right to be forgotten gets rid of.
So it also actually, so as I said, when I discussed the first definition of right to be forgotten, I actually talked about how it's how any information that appears to be inadequate or irrelevant or no longer relevant or excessive. So when I mean inadequate, or maybe inadequate or irrelevant, I think that also considers the same notion. If you see, like, and it's irrelevant because the person was never convicted of a sexual assault, or maybe the information was not, maybe it was like twisted in some way, and then the news was twisted in some way, and then it goes in a different manner, so that's inadequate now. So I think this definitely covered the thing I actually talked about right now. But yep, so I think that's all I'd have to say. But it's such an interesting topic. Okay, are you there or are you gone? No, I cannot. I can just see you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, just a little bit of time left, so let me quickly go back over this. When you talked about the privacy rights versus right, you talked about how if someone went into your house, took a picture of you, which was illegal, that they should not have been able to do that, and then uploaded that picture to the internet, I agree. But the reason why you would have the right to get rid of that picture would not be because you have a right to be forgotten. It's because you have a legally protected belief in the idea of a right to privacy. That's different. If someone took a picture of you out on the street being drunk, That's the difference here. See, a lot of the things that you're criticizing are all current law. You have an issue with people saying things that would be like, if someone did something, you talked about the kid maybe accused of sexual assault but hadn't actually done it. That would be protected already under slander, under libel laws. If someone took a picture of you in your home and uploaded that, that would be protected already under privacy laws. We're talking about information that is subjective. And the reason why it's caused a problem is because it steps on people's right to know information that is actually true, that is actually published as freedom of speech and as freedom of
Right, forgot. Okay.